It's called Sail of the Century, and it's an attempt to get as many boats from as many years that the MYA has existed all together in one spot and show them off to the public.
So there's a good selection of boats here today, and it just shows the origins of model yachting.
Melting the snow with its turn, and this sun daily she holds a rhyme as she circles the earth. Hello again.
The sport of model yachting is fascinating because you can, in a few minutes, have a fantastic sail.
This is an attempt to show Joe Public what model yachting has been doing in the last 100, or rather more than 100 years in fact, because there are some boats here from well before 1911. So model yachting we know existed in the 1820s because there was a group of tradesmen, cobblers, gunsmiths who sailed on a reservoir that at that time existed in Green Park, just behind where the Green Park station is now. They moved to the Serpentine when the reservoir was enclosed sometime in the 1840s, and there was model yacht sailing on the Serpentine in the 1840s, 1850s. We know there was a club at Highgate, there was a club at Clapham, there were almost certainly clubs elsewhere in England and Wales, but we don't know about them. There was serious model yachting going on, no doubt about that. I mean, there were clubs on the Round Pond here. The Model Yacht Sailing Association, which is still the resident club here, was founded in 1876, and in 1884 a group split off to form the London Model Yacht Club, still using the same water, and it's quite clear from the way in which the split took place and the membership of the London when they split, that this was a class thing. The gentlemen formed the London and the oiks stayed in the MYSA. In the 1890s, one of the members of the MYSA complained that we working men cannot devote the time or the money to our model yachting that our confreres in the London do, you know, all this sort of stuff, and produced some totally spurious ideas that Lord Trimblesdown, who was a member of the London, had spent £500 in 1890 something on having a couple of boats built and trimmed for him. Now, because the London records exist, I was able to find that Lord Trimblesdown never had a new boat in the whole of his model yachting career. He was always taking over second-hand boats from other club members. I don't know where this story came from.
Woke up in the garden shed, curl up on a makeshift bed.
I've spent a lot of my time making boats that are simple and easy to put together and basically cheap. And whereas you might spend £3,000 on quite a small-ish boat, you can build a footy for £15 plus radio, so you can be on the water for £60. And we have children, or we have families, where each child has one of these, and it is absolutely amazing fun. We're starting by the windward mark and sailing down a course that's exactly 50 foot long. The leeward mark has got a sail on it, so it's always going downwind and going to leeward.
What you've got to do is sail around the course 3 times and then put in your best time. It's downwind to upwind course, so it tests both of your skills.
When you get to the marks, you've got to spin round the marks as soon as possible, and it's a bit like you know, going round a course like the Top Gear's star in a reasonably priced car. You have to do it absolutely perfectly, and you need practice, but it's great for people to learn, because you've got to learn these things, and this is a very, very good way of doing it. Oh, that was a good turn. Jibing in with the boom hitting the sail. Actually, we're on quite a good one here.
My first love would have saved the people. My first love would have parted seas, and my first love would have sailed to China and back again for
can have a good start to the course, but by the end the wind could have completely dropped out and you could just be lagging behind. So it's all dependent.
And these boats are the fastest boats in the world because you can do 3 penalty turns in under 10 seconds. There's no other boat can do that than footies. They are absolutely brilliant.
Well, they're fun, they're very manoeuvrable. You can find so many different designs for them and you can personalise them however you want. The main thing is that they're quite small and you only need really a breath of wind to get them going. You can submit these times online and then there's, I believe, a world leaderboard and you can get yourself ranked on that.
The world record at this is 2 minutes 58 seconds.
Season, my first love would have sailed to China and back again for me.
I think we're seeing a time now where model yachting is diversifying quite a lot. Historically, you've seen from all the beautiful boats that we've had here, most of them are centred around some of the traditional classes, the Marblehead, the A-class, the 10-rater, and they have evolved as the main classes, and that's because they were built by cottage industry and the owners themselves. And as we're moving forward into the 21st century, the 1 metre has become, although its original intentions was for most people to build at home, it's becoming something that most people will go to a supplier to get their boat, and that's developing in smaller classes. So you've got Micro Magics, you've got the RG65, you've got the Laser, and you've also got the footies, and all of these classes are developing. And they all have their benefits. The one for the footy, which why people like it, is because it maintains the ability to design and experiment with yacht design, albeit at a very small scale. And a lot of people like that because of the pressures of time. In this day and age, it's seen that people don't commit to a winter build. They quite like doing a couple of evenings, and the footy is great for that.
To fly like a bird on the breeze.
The footy internet course is a great way of getting people involved, because it's simple, it's quick, it's against the score. I'm sure it's been explained to you that it's like the Top Gear leaderboard, and kids like that because it's got some level of competition and it's over quickly, they want to have another go. And it's great. All of those smaller classes that I listed are generating enthusiasm for the sport, and I think that's very good for the next 100 years of model yachting.
1911, at the start of the association, the main class was the 10-rater, which was a waterline sail area rule. Very simple, waterline measured in inches, multiplied by the sail area in square inches, divided by 6,000, must not equal more than 10. Well, the 10-rater was in existence before the MYA, under various rules, the 1730 rule and various others. You get into the 50s and the 60s and these boats start to get horrendously fast, and they take a lot of coping with and keeping up. Seb Coe would have had difficulty in a rough day keeping up with them, believe me.
My particular interest is with the older yachts, and here we have 3 important examples of the A-class. The A-class was introduced in 1922 as a result of a man called Bill Daniels, W.J. Daniels, Bill Daniels, who started his model yachting interests building model yachts soon after 1900. And by 1922 he, in conjunction with Hextall Smith, who was then the editor of Yachting Monthly, introduced a challenge to international model yachting, and they produced what became to be today the A-class. It started off being the Yachting Monthly 6-metre class. And here we have a boat called Invader, which was the first boat with which Daniels won the first international championship in 1922. Daniels was a designer, an expert sailor, and a very talented builder.
Design, building and sailing. And most sailors build. Not all, but nearly all. Many builders design. Occasionally you will find somebody who does all 3.
Makes you feel bad about us being the same.
they make you feel bad about, but don't you be ashamed. What makes you feel sad about the love you gave?
The Marblehead became very popular because a guy in America went to the back of his car, measured it, and it was 50 inches long. So the Marblehead is 50 inches long, and it's been one of the most popular classes because it fits in a car and is very easy to transport.
It was brought over to this country in the mid-30s by Arthur Kerridge, who was the then secretary of the Ryde Model Yacht Club on the Isle of Wight. The Ryde was the first club to have Marbleheads. The MYA here was the second club to have Marbleheads, and the club has flourished from that day to this. The Marbleheads of those days resemble nothing like modern Marbleheads of today.
What we're going to look at here is a timeline of Marbleheads spanning from the early to mid-50s right the way through to the current day. The one on the end here is Cracker Barrel. Cracker Barrel, registered 1371, was sailed at Birkenhead and is a Whitty Hornet. Moving along, this is Brandy Snap with its bulb keel.
Brandy Snap was very narrow and quite light, and it was basically uncompetitive against the heavier boats. But when I put a bulb keel on it to the same depth, it became a winner, and it won the national championship in 1964, and it completely changed model yachting thinking, because from then on the boats became lighter, narrower, but just as stable as the heavier boats.
White Rabbit, designed again by Roger Stollery.
It has a different construction of the keel through to two simple mouldings to make it very easy to construct, very cheap, and brought model yachting to a great number of people.
Moving on to Blood Axe, one of the very famous Marbleheads that won the 1975 World Championships, is very easy to mould in two parts, pot riveted together and then filled along the waterline and painted. One of the advantages of this is that many club members could make their own. The Reflection was designed by Fred Shepherd and was a similar era to the Blood Axe, and was very successful when Dave Latham of the Fleetwood Club sailed it. We're now getting to the era where radio control started to take over, and
Well, when we first got radios, which was in the early 1970s, when radio equipment became small, light and cheap enough to put in the Marblehead class, that's when we had the explosion in radio sailing. But originally there were very few frequencies available, and we could only race 6 boats at a time. The very first Radio Marblehead Championship was held at Guildford 25 years ago, and we had 6 boats, 6 boat fleets, and we got 6 races each over the weekend.
Pickaxe was Roger Stollery's first attempt at radio design, and it also had the first swing rig on it of note, and a lot was learnt with that boat, which was then taken forward into the 80s and future designs. This is a Sea Scamp by Squire K. Was a very good designer in the north of England from the Ashton Club, and many of the guys from Fleetwood and Birkenhead learnt to sail radio in the late 80s with boats designed by Squire, and the Sea Scamp was a particularly successful one at that time. Frisbee was one of my early Marbleheads, and I sailed it to win the Junior World Championships in 1988. You will see that the flared bow of the Blood Axe and the Pickaxe is maintained, but the method of joining the hulls together. You'll also note that this is a carbon design, and the keels are also in carbon and starting to get deeper. Moving on to Zoom, which is a raw edge designed in 1991 for the 1992 World Championships, and this was the first time when Marblehead started to go narrow. The reason for that was because light airs were expected. Actually, they proved to be very good in all weathers, and has been the theme for Marbleheads from that point onwards. The sort of similar design of that era is the Paradox, designed by Graham Bantock, and similarly designed for that championship. You can see that the keels are getting deeper, the carbon mouldings are getting more sophisticated, and the quality of the fittings has also improved quite rapidly from those at the end of the 1980s. This is a vane Marblehead again, just to show that vane Marbleheads are still sailed. This is a Crazy Tube 2, which was a Stollery design around the 2000 mark.
This is like the ultimate of the current design trend in the Marblehead, certainly, which allows great freedom, in that the keel is very long and is quite light, and the hull itself is round and incredibly narrow, so it minimises the wetted surface in light airs. And the rig is a sophisticated swing rig, although it still has the same principle of the jib forces balancing the main. And this one has a particular thing. You can pull the sail in and alter the kicking strap just by a change in the sheeting on the trim on your radio. So it's a very sophisticated machine that can do a lot of sail adjustment just with one simple sheet.
And finally, we have a prime number, again by Graham Bantock, and is really a very, very fine example of the quality of moulding that is now carried out in carbon fibre. It's beautifully done, and is a very good example of the modern Marblehead. And as you can see, the difference now between what we have here with a prime number and what we started at the other end with the Whitty Hornet is quite incredible, and is a very interesting timeline showing just how much the Marblehead class has changed within the scope of a rule that's exactly the same in essence since its invention in 1932.
Of course, with the advent of radio control, it has made the boats themselves much more controllable, and also it has enabled clubs to be formed on lakes where you've not got full access around the lake, which is obviously a necessity for a free-sailing vane or brain-steered boat.
Well, the main development was the vane gear, which came over originally from America, and several people latched onto it very early in this country in the early 1950s, and very quickly there was an explosion of commercial made vane gears for lots of people to use. The main one of these in the late 1950s, early 60s was the Jones vane. It was made by the Jones brothers of Birkenhead, and that was like the Model T Ford of vane gears. Everybody had one. They were simple and cheap, and your average man with a boat, with a Marblehead who came sailing at club level on a Saturday afternoon could have a vane gear and steer his boat very effectively.
In the 70s, late 70s and the 80s, the radio gear developed very quickly to the point where it was light enough to put into a Marblehead, and the radio Marblehead really took off as the class for radio sailing, and racing, fleet racing developed, so that rather than match racing, which would be the norm for vane sailing from 1911 onwards with the MYA, we were now racing like dinghies would, round courses, 6 boats on the water, and gradually through the 80s, as technology improved, the number of frequencies available increased, we could race more boats on the water.
The World Championship that we had earlier this year, we had 70 boats taking part, 20 boats in a fleet, and we got some 30 races altogether over the length of the competition.
Please come, rain on me with fire.
The skill involved in making a glass fibre boat as light as that and watertight is beyond me. I know I can't, I've tried, I can't do it. And it is quite staggering how well these boats are built.
The Model Yachting Association is growing, and it's growing because of better communications. More people know about it, and we have a huge potential in sailing clubs, where older sailors who can't sail dinghies anymore can come and have an absolutely fantastic time sailing these models.
I've personally had a wonderful 50 years. I've met some fantastic people, I've been to some great places, and I've had some wonderful sport. And anyone else who comes into this sport will have the same. It's a sport for life. It doesn't matter whether you're a grandson or a granddad or a granddaughter or a grandmother, we can all enjoy it the same. Come and join us.